Hi, my name's Brenda Valdez.
I'm Brandon Neri.
And I'm Robert Vaughn.
So, our project was the Wayfinder project, and the problem that we had was that we need a way to explore interstellar space and gather information that can only be gathered outside of the heliosphere. This is very important because there's a lot that we don't know about what's out there, and we had to make a way to discover it. So what we had to do was we had to design something that will reach and then get into interstellar space within 20 years, and then last for 20 years once it reaches there, carrying a payload of at least 50 kilograms. This is to gather data and collect information on what is truly out there.
So the significance of this mission, as my groupmate already alluded to, is that it will allow us to acquire more in-depth knowledge about the nature of the edges of the heliosphere and what lies beyond it in interstellar space. And attaining this knowledge will help us to develop new methods of both interstellar and heliospheric space travel. And this will improve our potential for future interstellar missions, and they will be able to build off the experience and knowledge that we gain through this mission. And it also increases the possibility of the future development of manned missions that are similar. So the difficulties associated with this are the normal difficulties associated with spaceflight, such as the hostile environment, as well as the particular difficulties associated with the great distances we're covering. At these distances, communication with a craft is very difficult. Maintenance of the craft is very difficult, especially because you can't physically interact with it. And the uniqueness of the mission also makes it more challenging because there are few previous examples that we can learn from.
So, our product should be able to achieve heliosphere departure in no more than 20 years, allow us to improve upon sensor system accuracy and resolution. This would allow us to provide better data about the interstellar medium, and finally improve upon the longevity of previous interstellar probes.
So there have been a couple of things that have been done like this before. Not very many, but most notable among the ones that have been done are Voyager 1 and 2, which have actually reached interstellar space and are still going. We did a lot of research on those in particular in coming up with our designs, because they have been what have been gathering the data out there and actually passed into interstellar space, and that is our entire goal. But what we are trying to do is significantly harder because we have a time frame to reach interstellar space. In only 20 years, we have to get out there, and then we have to last for another 20 years once we do. We also have to gather a little bit different kinds of data than what the Voyagers gathered, and so while we could base a lot of what we were doing on them, it is not the same project.
And this led to our development of a concept of operations. The detailed concept is listed here before you, but it's really divided into 4 main phases. The first one involves leaving Earth's gravitational sphere of influence. The second phase involves traversing the heliosphere and getting to the heliopause that marks the boundary of interstellar space. And the third phase involves crossing the heliopause and getting into interstellar space and continuing flight for 20 years beyond that. And then there's a fourth continuous phase that goes on during all 3 of the previous ones, where our craft will be collecting data and sending it back to Earth.
So for our requirements, we were able to break things down into 3 general things for our hierarchy. We have the system requirements overall, which are things like it needing to reach there in just 20 years. We have the element requirements, which are what are the individual elements responsible for, and we were able to break this down further into what the subsystems are required to do. So here you can see our list out of our main system, our 3 elements, which are our probe, our launch system, and our data analysis facility, which will stay on Earth, and you can see our actual subsystems of each of those elements. The probe has 4, and the propulsion navigation is responsible for getting it out there on time and without hitting anything so that it actually can continue to keep going. The data collection is simply just collecting all the kinds of data that we are going to need, whether that be data on things that are magnetic out there, data on individual particles, things like that. We are going to be collecting all of that data through those subsystems. And then we have communication, which its entire job is just to get that data that it collects back to us here on Earth. And the electric power part is just to actually power the propulsion, as well as power the subsystem for data collection, communication, and propulsion navigation. As far as the launch system, our launch vehicle is separate from our facility because the vehicle is actually going to be leaving Earth and needs to do so with the velocity and acceleration necessary to help get the probe outside of the actual heliosphere within 20 years. The launch facility is just where we need to actually launch from. The data analysis facility, the actual communication between the probe and us is going to be handled here. And this is also where all the data must be processed. Why those are the two subsystems that are actually inside of the data analysis facility.
So when conducting research on our probe, it was decided to complete a trade study on our propulsion system. So a topsis trade study allowed us to weigh different options and compare different solutions to figure out which propulsion system would be the best for us. So as you can see here, we really focus on the precision, weight, speed, cost, and longevity of each propulsion system. And here at the bottom, the electric propulsion system ranked as first. So while in previous missions, chemical propulsion was chosen, electric propulsion has made leaps and bounds and is now the preferred method for deep space travel.
So with that in mind, we developed an early functional architecture for our system. Some of its main features are listed here on the right, but there's two I really want to draw your attention to. The first is, as my groupmate described, the main propulsive subsystem is going to be an electrically driven ion thruster, or a pair of electrically driven ion thrusters because of their benefits over other propulsive subsystems. And electric power for this system is derived from multi-mission radioisotope thermoelectric generators, which are an excellent source of electric power in environments where you can't rely on things like solar energy. This is an example of a morphological matrix which we use to examine different alternatives that are available for different subsystems. And this is our revised concept architecture after further research. It's a little bit more detailed. It includes possibly available sensors that can be installed on the craft, and it's just more precise than our earlier architecture. And these are alternate angles of that revised architecture. On the top left, the system is shown flying into the page away from the viewer. On the bottom left, it's shown flying out of the page toward the viewer. And on the right, it is shown next to a potential launch vehicle in its compacted form to illustrate how it can be fit into the payload section of the launch vehicle. And the merits of this revised architecture are chiefly that it will devote a greater proportion of its mass to the propulsion of the system, and so we're going to get greater heliospheric escape velocities from our system than previous systems were able to attain, even though our craft is going to have a greater total mass than them. And our craft is also going to be simple enough that it can be compacted without too much difficulty into the payload section of a launch vehicle.
So, as far as our financial projection goes, our total projected cost is $745 million, which, while it seems like a lot, is actually significantly less than Voyager 1 and 2. A good bit of this is actually going to be towards paying personnel, and over the 5-year development, that is a total of $95 million just for the actual salaries of those people. Our potential customers are really just the U.S. government, because this would most likely be a joint endeavor with a branch of them like NASA, so that we can actually get launch permission, and they would want access to the data either way, so it's better to do it as a joint operation with them than to try to sell the information after doing it yourself. As far as being good financial stewards, using the minimal amount of funds to actually make this project and make it well by researching things that have been done before, such as the Voyagers, as well as making a probe that is going to last a significant amount of time to reduce the need for further probes, are the ways that we are being good financial stewards.
So for deep space missions to become more common, we need the ability to travel through the heliosphere faster, assure sensory resolution and accuracy is reliable, and since we want to put an emphasis on longevity, we need a robust design. So our system will also be able to achieve more efficient power generation, have a greater solar system escape velocity, and in the end, this probe will help further interstellar space research and broaden our understanding of our galaxy. So thank you so much for listening to our presentation, and we hope you enjoyed learning about our probe.